Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Limitless with Nadia. Today, we have another guest with us who was on a previous episode. You might recognize him. It's Andrew, who actually owns this studio that we're recording in right now. So thank you so much for joining us again for another episode.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. So for context, you guys, this episode is going to be all about breakups because I don't know if you guys know this, but astrologically, we just finished a Venus retrograde, which if you're listening to this mid-April, we just got out of that, and there are so many people that I know. I don't know if you know a lot of people as well that have just recently gone through a really crazy breakup that might have come out of nowhere. Maybe you were with somebody for a long time and it just crashed and burned and you're just trying to figure it out. So I really felt called to do an episode on breakups so that we can kind of create the guide to a breakup and really how to use it as your superpower instead of letting it kind of keep you down. Because I think obviously breakups are a pretty traumatic experience, especially when it's something that you didn't really see coming. So my hope is that when you listen to this episode, if you are navigating a breakup, if you recently had a breakup, that you will find some wisdom in this and be able to kind of use it for your advantage. So Andrew here has a really, really fascinating story, which I think we actually touched on it last time of how, you, what really prompted you to change your life and get into this space business-wise was a really traumatic breakup. So tell us, how did that even come about?
Yeah. So I think, oftentimes we know, like when we're in it, that we're probably not supposed to be in it. Mm-hmm. And there's just something that is constantly calling on us like, man, I really probably shouldn't be in this relationship, or I can't sleep at night. I'm staring out the window and I'm like, what feels off? Mm-hmm. And so oftentimes either out of fear or otherwise we stay in it for way longer than we should, mm-hmm. or we just never take the leap. And I think most oftentimes that's because of fear. Mm-hmm. And it's when you're really not meant to be with somebody, all the signs will kind of tell you. And then eventually something will just happen where it's like, in my opinion, it's God will be like, hey, look, enough's enough. We're done here. Yeah. Especially if you're meant for something more. If you're meant for something more and this relationship's really not serving that purpose, then like eventually it's going to crash and burn. And I think you have two options. Either one, you can make the decision consciously to leave on your own, or two, the decision will be made for you and it's not going to be comfortable.
Oh my God, there's a quote actually that I recently read and it was like, let go or be dragged.
Yeah.
It's like, if you don't make the decision to do that, you're going to end up in a point where you are forced to do it. And it's way more uncomfortable in my opinion in that way. So for you, and I totally agree, right? Like all of us know usually from the very beginning that a certain relationship is just not aligned for us, but it takes us a while to really come to terms with it. So for you, in your experience, what were those signs? Like what made it clear to you towards the beginning where it was like, this is just not the right partnership for me?
Well, I think you have to have a very similar belief system. And, whether you're a Christian, being with a Christian, a Muslim, being with a Muslim, like I think there is a tremendous amount of value in being equally yoked with your partner.
Totally.
And too often I think people, especially like I did this all the time. I just wanted to be with someone so bad that I didn't care what their character or belief systems were. Yeah. And therefore I settled with people that were not serving me and weren't even serving themselves because they were just so messed up. They had never done the work. And so what I ended up doing, let's just talk about after the relationship for a minute. When I got into a new one, I was like, I'm never getting into a relationship again with someone that doesn't share the same belief system and hasn't done the work to fix whatever type of trauma that they've had in their life. Yeah. And some of the first questions I asked was, what trauma have you been through? Like, how's your relationship with your father? Yeah. Like, I need to know these things because these like completely ruined my life about 6 months, or a year ago.
I mean, that is such a good point. And it just also reminds me of this concept that like you can't really be in a healthy partnership unless both individuals are in a space where they're connected to themselves. And especially like, you do have to be really honest with yourself going into a relationship of what are my biggest values? Like what is really important to me? Because odds are it's going to be really important that the other person also reflects that value system as well. And I think for a lot of people I've experienced where it's like, oh, I realized a little too late that we were not spiritually aligned, which actually, and I know that you're a very spiritual person and I am as well. And I think we're spiritual beings having a human experience. Yeah. So like without that element being aligned, I feel like it definitely can cause a lot of disharmony and
friction.
And like it also directly correlates with there's no healing that can happen if you're not spiritually connected. All of that kind of, it's all part of the same picture.
And I think, what happens with most of these relationships that end like catastrophically, it's because one or both partners did not set healthy boundaries. And that's the biggest thing is there's something called the drama triangle or the trauma triangle, right? And so we're constantly in this cycle where it's like, I'm a victim and then I lash out at somebody. And so now they're the victim because I'm being the antagonist because I'm lashing out at them. And then it's like, oh, then they feel bad. So now I have to go in and rescue them. And then because I'm rescuing them, now I haven't set healthy boundaries. So now I'm going to be victimized again. And it's just like a vicious cycle. And the only way to break being in this trauma triangle or drama triangle is to set boundaries. And then more importantly, you have to uphold them because too many people will set a healthy boundary. They won't uphold it. When it's broken, it's like, how far can I teeter the line? What happens?
Yeah.
And then when the man or the woman is constantly breaking the boundary, like things just fall apart. They get broken. And then you can't trust that person anymore.
Yeah. That's a very, I feel like it's so common for people. Like when you're not really conscious, you just are on autopilot feeding into this loop without even realizing it. And so for you, healthy boundaries is a really big piece of that. What does it look like to really establish healthy boundaries in a relationship?
I think a practical one would be like, for instance, I don't want to be spoken to in a like condescending way. So if you're going to talk to me like that, like I'm cutting it right now and we're not going to talk like that again, or this isn't going to work.
Yeah.
But what happens is someone will say, hey, don't talk to me that way. Or they won't even say that. They'll just let it happen. And then they get angry and then they start building out resentment because it continuously happens, but they never set the boundary.
Yes.
So if you never set the boundary and the person doesn't know that they can't cross that line with you, they'll continue to do it unknowingly. And then when you finally snap, they're like, what the hell happened? Why didn't you tell me this?
Yeah.
Right? It's because the communication wasn't had, the boundary wasn't set, therefore it could never be upheld. Right? So you set yourself up for failure because you never set the boundary out of trying to protect them. So it's like you're trying to rescue their feelings because you don't want them to feel bad, but they're now making you feel bad because you didn't set that boundary.
Totally.
Right? So in a practical application, it's like, hey, I don't like to be spoken to that way. I don't know where that's coming from, but like that, whether it's my trigger or like whatever, I don't care if you intended it or not, we're not going to do that.
I think that's so difficult for some people to do because being able to establish a boundary really requires you to, one, trust yourself, and two, be really grounded with knowing that me setting a boundary is not me being mean to you or me kind of like disrespecting you. It's like I'm putting this boundary down.
It's having self-respect.
It's out of self-respect, and it's also out of respect for the relationship. Because like you said, if I don't bring this up and talk about it, and there's a way to go about doing that, obviously, right? It's like the I-centered language and not like pointing fingers and all that stuff. But like you said, if you don't do that, that starts to create a lot of hidden resentment underneath the surface, and that causes cracks in a relationship that becomes so difficult to get 100%. Through. Yeah, so I would say also.
Yeah, and I think like a really practical application of this to do it in a healthy way instead of just, hey, don't talk to me like that, because that's not going to go well.
Yeah.
But it's like, you could use the I feel sentence. It's like, hey, I know you might not have intended it this way, but when you say this, it makes me feel this. And I could be wrong for even feeling that way. But like, can we address this real quick?
Right.
And then they'll be like, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to make you feel that way. Or they're going to be like, well, I don't care if it makes you feel that way. That's how I talk. And now you know in that conflict, like, oh, this is someone that I can't vibe with because they're not respecting how I feel.
Totally. And I think that's something that's huge in a relationship that, at least for me personally, was a really big learning curve as I got older. Was I think a lot of us, I don't know, I'm speaking from a woman's perspective as well. So I think for women, sometimes we go into a relationship and we just immediately get very attached because the whole thing feels really fun and it feels so emotional. It's like a fairy tale. Oh my gosh, like Prince Charming. And then that's where you start to get into the space where you overlook those things. Whereas really the way you should be approaching relationships in order to keep it healthy and mature is like, you and this person have connected. It's going well so far, but you always need to be taking note. Number one, you being able to show up as your evolved self that can place a healthy boundary, but also every time you do that, it's almost like a litmus test of like, how are they responding to this?
Well, that's it. You need to know their response.
Yeah.
And that's why conflict is healthy.
Yes.
It's not like we're not trying to avoid conflict. In fact, I'll dive into the conflict just to test. I don't want to test the boundaries. I want to test the response.
Totally.
Right. So how does this person react when, I engage in healthy conflict? Are they going to start tossing plates and pots across the room? Are they going to have freak out? Is it like, hey, let me call the girls and talk shit? Like, what's actually happening in this relationship? Because if it's an unhealthy response to a healthy conflict, then that's a person you just know that you can't be with.
Yeah, totally. And I think because also obviously a lot of us have been in super toxic relationships, and you have to think about like, how does that even develop? Yeah. How do you reach a point because at the beginning it's never toxic, right? Yeah. At the beginning it's like, oh my gosh, this is so magical. But I think the way it becomes toxic is when you make a habit out of downplaying the conflict or overlooking when somebody, either whether it's yourself or the other person, is not able to show up to resolve that conflict in a healthy way.
Yeah.
So that's why I think, going back to what I was saying earlier, like as a woman especially, but I think obviously for both parties too, it's like you really have to be able to come from a perspective going into any relationship that we don't know this person all the way through. We don't know what their trauma is. We don't know. Yeah, we can ask the questions and everything, but like you will only really know the depth of how much they've met themselves and how much they've healed based on when these things come up, how are they handling it? And you have to be fully willing to accept if somebody's showing you who they are and what they're capable of, not going based on the potential, because that's something women are
they're so bad at that.
So bad at this. But like, it's not about potential. You cannot measure anybody's or you can't measure the viability of a relationship based on somebody's projected potential. Because I think also from a woman's perspective, we are able to really see a man's potential up front. And like, I know the kind of man that you can grow into, but you can't keep going based on that. It's like how he's showing up in the present moment right in front of you is who he is. And if you can't accept him as he is with where he's standing right now, then, you know, you got to make some tough decisions.
Yeah, and it has to be an equal balance. I don't know if you've experienced this, but there's oftentimes like, especially if you're a people pleaser or you're somebody that grew up, you know, kind of as a codependent, you will engage in unhealthy relationships with narcissists unknowingly and just constantly be pouring into them. But if they're not pouring back into you, then like it's doomed for failure. And it's going to be very, very uncomfortable the way that it breaks too.
Oh my gosh, it's the worst. I think everybody listening to this has probably had that kind of experience, right? Because like you said, when you've experienced something in your early childhood that became familiar to you, even if it wasn't good, it's something that you're used to. And so, yeah, you do end up in this space where you're continuously pouring into somebody that can't hold the space or give that back to you. So I think another aspect of like, how do I really start approaching my relationships from a healthier perspective is like, how can I develop a solid enough relationship with myself where I know what I deserve, I respect myself, and I will gatekeep my energy from anybody who's not able to reciprocate the love and the light that I have, you know?
100%. And I think, you know, oftentimes if you were in that type of relationship, if your relationship recently ended and it was catastrophic, it's probably, I don't want to say all the time, but most of the time it was probably because you were in some type of narcissistic relationship, right? Some type of codependent situation. So what I've found is most narcissists, they may actually be good people, but something happened to them when they were younger. Like something traumatic happened to them and internally they don't feel loved. They don't feel like they're worthy. And so what happens is they have to put other people down externally in order to feel value, because they need to feel like they're better than them.
Yes.
And what happens is if you're a codependent, which is in the opposite spectrum, you too potentially could have had something happen to you when you were younger, but instead of shaming everybody else to make yourself feel better, you shame yourself all the time and you have to give to other people because that's how you make yourself feel better.
Yes.
So what happens is you have this totally unhealthy like connection here where one of them needs to put you down so they feel better and you need to lift them up so you feel better. So you're in this vicious cycle of constantly pouring into somebody and all they know how to do is take.
I love that we're now getting into the topic of narcissists and narcissism because I think this is such a big topic because it is so common, right? But you mentioned something interesting, and it's that narcissists are just usually good people, but they've had something traumatic happen to them very early on that made them feel unloved, and they didn't have the coping skills to really work through that. And I think it's so essential because everybody listening to this has probably had an experience, whether it was in a relationship or not, with somebody who showed up in a very narcissistic way, right? And it's like you really, from my perspective at least, like it is so important to come from a space where you're not villainizing them and putting them in this corner of like, they are just an evil, bad person, because I don't think there's a lot of growth in that.
No.
Like you have to be able to see the light and see like the divinity in everybody and be able to recognize like, yeah, this person may have really wronged me and done terrible things to me, but that doesn't make them a terrible person. Wish them all the best. Just stay away from me and stay out of my life.
But you can love someone from a distance.
Totally.
And that's what you have to do with a lot of people, especially if you are in that or you're coming out of that relationship where you're just constantly in there, because like it was told to me in a specific way where it's like, think of everybody as if they were a child. And this helped me for some of the traumatic stuff that I went through as a kid. Cause I look at my father who said a lot of hurtful things growing up, and I'm like, he was just a scared, hurt child.
Yeah.
Right. And when you look at him that way, it's like, I have a little bit more grace. And so there was a point in time where I went through this catastrophic breakup, and it was horrifying, and it was bad. Like she got charged for domestic violence, you know? And so on the other side of that, it ended up being a beautiful thing. That's what's brought me to where I am today, right? But in the process of learning why I went into that relationship, because I did a year of counseling every week. I went away to a retreat center even to try to figure out not so much what's wrong with that person. It's more so like I was trying to figure out what's wrong with me. Why did I stay in that so long? And so what I realized was it was a comfort zone, because what I grew up in was so toxic that me getting back into and staying in a toxic relationship reminded me of home.
Yes.
And because I didn't know anything else, that familiarity felt normal to me, even though it wasn't. And when I got into a healthy relationship after, it was the most uncomfortable thing I've ever been in, because I'm like, all right, when's the fight going to happen?
Yeah.
When are we going to pop off?
Yep.
You know, like it feels boring,
yes.
you know? And so it's because that's what healthy feels like.
Yeah.
And so many people don't know what that is. And so in some of the practice, it was like, let me think about my father and everything that happened with him as if he was a scared kid and had no idea what he was doing. He was just trying to figure it out and do the best he could. Yeah. And when I looked at him in that light, I was like, oh, wow, you know, I have a little bit more grace for him. I actually went home and spoke to him. Wow. And I was like, yeah, I just, you know, I wanted to address all the things that happened when I was a kid. This happened, that happened, this happened. You know, it hurt me a lot. And that's what made me get in these relationships and do all these things seeking approval of others, because I felt like I didn't have it at home. And like we had a little crying session together, and he was like, I only spoke to you that way because that's how my dad spoke to me.
Interesting.
And I realized that it was a generational curse and it had to break with me.
Wow, that is so powerful and so profound. And I think that like a lot of people are starting to realize that a lot of their trauma has just been passed down across generations. And it's like that ancestral line will wait for somebody like you to feel it and heal it, you know, instead of just like suppressing it and just doing the whole mastery thing of just doing what was done to you. And that's huge. And like you said, it is so helpful to be able to think of the people that hurt you as a scared little kid, because that's literally, I mean, psychologically, that's where they are. Yeah. Like from a developmental perspective, like when you're experiencing a very significant emotional reaction to something, you are your inner child in that exact moment. You're regressing back to the point in your life where something was very painful for you and you didn't know how to handle it. So you just had a meltdown and did what you could with the tools that you had at the time. So if you can really start looking at everybody in your life that has hurt you, whether it's an ex, whether it's, you know, whatever, from the perspective of hurt people, and he's also, you know, this person is also still a child in a lot of ways. True. You know, it's easier, like you said, to have grace for those people. And there was something else that you mentioned as well that I wanted to talk about, which is that something about the familiar. Yeah, your brain will choose a familiar hell over an unfamiliar heaven. And I think that's also a really big piece for anybody who has gone through a breakup or is going through some like a really traumatic relationship or whatever it is. You really have to challenge yourself to step into this territory of what would a healthy relationship feel like for me, and how can I become the person that can maintain that? Yeah. How did that come about for you? Like, how did you deal with okay, I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop and not like acting on that?
There's a practice called like your healthy adult. And if you can get in tune with that person, that version of yourself, it's like, as you know, when I think of my healthy adult, it's like, I think of like a version of myself when he's like 75 or 80 years old and he's like been through all this shit already. Yeah. And then I go into this like quiet space in my mind, and that a lot of people do this through meditation, but sometimes I'll just be like, all right, if I were my older self, how would I handle this situation? Because what happens is, going back to the people being little kids, think of it like we're on a bus and your healthy adult's driving the bus, and all of a sudden you come up on a turn and like something pops off where you get triggered. And it could be, you know, I'm driving to work and somebody cut me off. And what happens is your healthy adult, if you don't allow him to take control and drive, or her, will take a back seat and allow your 4-year-old version of you that got, you know, triggered in that exact same way to jump up in the driver's seat and start driving the bus. Yeah. And they're driving chaotic and they're flipping people off and they're throwing shit out the window and they're just ready to like ream everybody off the road. Yeah. And in reality, that's your like 4-year-old version that just popped up out of nowhere. And now he's in control of the bus. So it's like, how can we breathe through that and be like, all right, 4-year-old Drew, you're not in control of the bus. Like, we got to relax. Yeah. We're okay. We're in a healthy spot. We're in the car. Like, that person's having a bad day. They're on their way to work. They're just some little 4-year-old kid too that's like freaking out because he's about to get fired because he's an hour late to work. Have some grace, let it go. Right. And now that's your healthy adult sitting in the driver's seat. And I think it was the same way when I got into the relationship. It was like, okay, my like 13-year-old self that's ready to pop off and like raise hell so that it can get attention is not feeling what it needs to feel right now. So I have to give myself a little bit of attention so that I can show up in this relationship healthy. Yes. Because normally I'm going to just cause some chaos so I can get some attention. Right. And instead, let me take a back seat, to that one. Healthy adult drives the bus. I'm going to go take myself to a movie or whatever I need to do to give myself some attention.
Yeah.
And then I can show up in the relationship healthy and not cause mayhem.
So powerful. I think everybody should have or should establish a relationship with their child self, because I do the same thing of whenever I start to feel unloved or I'm triggered by something, I'm like, let me just take my little 4-year-old self by the hand and we're going to go, get some ice cream or whatever. Because you really do have to give yourself the validation and the love and the attention that you're unconsciously seeking from somebody else because you're sensing that they're not giving it to you. That's so powerful. It's so crazy how everything comes down to emotion regulation. Like really just learning how to sit with yourself and not let those emotions or that 4-year-old version of you take the driver's seat and kind of control how everything is going. But there is also something else that I wanted to mention. I actually just remembered this, what you were talking about earlier. You said when you went to therapy, you didn't want to know what was wrong with her. You wanted to know, why did I stay in this relationship for so long? That, I think it's so important for anybody listening to this, because again, the ins and outs of a breakup can be super traumatic and very emotionally charged, but you really have to be able to look at this from the perspective of, my relationships are a mirror of my own consciousness. They are just a reflection of what's going on for me internally, which means it's actually never about the other person. It's not about why they did what they did. It's not about, we tend to put the focus on the other person when really the way you heal through a breakup is you put the focus back on you and you ask, okay, why did I maybe attract this person or this dynamic? What kind of pattern within me that I'm familiar with is being reenacted in this dynamic? My response to being traumatized by this person, or, they did something to me that was really hurtful. What does that say about kind of where I'm at and kind of maybe what wounds I need to start looking a little more closely at so I can heal them? So for you, when you were in that space of really doing therapy and like doing the healing to figure out kind of where you were at, where did that start for you? Like, how did that start to take shape?
It was just so traumatic the way that it went down. And my last 3 relationships before this one were traumatic as well. But this one, like, cherry on the top. It was so bad. I didn't want to go through it ever again. And so I had to ask myself, instead of being a victim and blaming someone else, which is what I had done in the past, it was like, let me take responsibility for where I am and what happened and figure out how I can never allow this to happen again. Because like the worst thing that can happen is when you don't take responsibility, you blame shift everything on the other person. You're now the victim and things continue to happen again and again. So if you don't address your own wounds and what's happened to you, you will continually date the same person or the same type of person with a different face over and over and over again until you learn the lesson. Because like you said, those people are mirrors of what's going on internally. And we've attracted them into our lives for a reason because of who we are in the moment when we met them. And sometimes we outgrow them. Sure. And then you split and it's a healthy, breakup, etc. But sometimes it's like, I haven't learned my lesson, so this has to end badly. And then if I don't learn it, I'm gonna have to do it all over again. So my thing was at a breaking point of, I never want to go through this again. So what can I learn about myself to ensure that I take responsibility to ensure that my future is not like my past?
Yes. Oh, that's so huge. It's funny because I think a lot of us tend to look at rock bottom as a bad thing. But when really, rock bottom is the best place to be because from there, the only place to go is up, right? Like you really do reach a point where you're like, I am never going to allow myself to go through this again. And it is so powerful to be able to step into that like accountability of, what role did I play in this? Because at the end of the day, that's what it's about. When you give your power away to other people by playing victim, and you guys have heard me talk about this all the time on this podcast, it is literally about being a conscious creator, taking accountability for what you are attracting and what you're a vibrational match to at any point in your life. And if you want to change the status quo, that's going to require you to kind of reflect inwards and be like, okay, what is it that's happening inside of me that needs to be kind of addressed? Because like you said, if you don't learn the lesson, you're going to keep attracting the same situation, just in different flavors, different people, different circumstances, until you internalize it and you really learn how you need to shift to be able to attract something different. And it also does go back to like your childhood patterns as well, like what you were familiar with as a kid, whether it's your relationship with your parents or primary caregivers or whoever, that's going to give you a lot of clues as to why you're kind of stuck in the same ruts over and over as an adult.
Why you continue to allow things, right? And I think it is good if you can go back and really think about those things, even if you have to go through like somatic therapy or whatever, like I did, because once you uncover those, you get to be in a place where you can say, all right, this happened to me at this age. I never set a boundary. Now I know what I can set a boundary, what I need to set a boundary for, because it's like this happened and it's now continually happening. because, someone that was an authority figure in my life continued to do this. And I wasn't old enough when I was 6 years old to have any authority to break that off and say, no, you can't do that to me.
Yeah.
Right. But now you're in a different position. You do have the authority. You're a grown ass adult and you can say, hey, this doesn't work that way. We're not going to let this happen again. And if it does, now you know that person doesn't respect your boundaries and it's time to cut it off. But you have the authority and the power now instead of giving it away to someone else.
Totally. And I think that is actually half the battle. I think the other half of the battle is being okay with somebody not being able to respect your boundaries and knowing that it's time to walk away. I think that's where also a lot of people do tend to get stuck, right? I mean, I've been guilty of it as well, of like, okay, I placed this boundary. I communicated to this person in a healthy way that like, this was actually not okay with me.
Yeah.
And they still didn't respect it and honor it and like move differently about it. And so you really do also have to come from a space where you trust yourself enough to know you will be okay with or without this person, right? You don't need to attach yourself to somebody to be okay, because that's another thing too. I think the way a toxic relationship becomes so toxic is that codependency piece where you're like, I will not be okay without you, so I'll sweep everything under the rug so we can just keep this going, right? That is probably, especially as a woman, that's like the worst space to be in, because think about it. It's like this person is basically emotionally neglecting or abusing you. You've tried to set the boundary, they're not respecting it, and yet there's this unhealthy attachment to it because you don't feel like you're going to be okay by yourself. I think that's also why anybody, before entering any kind of partnership, whether you're a man or a woman, you have to be so secure in yourself and your life and love your life the way it is before you enter another partnership, because you're not looking for any void to be filled. You're whole as you are, and now you just get to share it with somebody else.
Yeah, and that's the importance of doing the work internally. Like you said, taking yourself out for ice cream or whatever. If you're comfortable by yourself and you know how to feed yourself and your emotions, then you don't need someone else to do it for you. Yeah. In fact, if they're not doing it, you're just like, whatever.
Totally. Totally.
Although it is nice to have someone that is going to appease you or pursue you or court you. Like those are all important things, but it's not like you're not going about it from a place of desperation. Like I need this. Yeah.
Because you've already given it to yourself. Exactly. So again, somebody else just doing it for you is just like a cherry on top.
Exactly.
I think the other thing too, that's really important to talk about with this, while we're on the dynamic as well of like narcissists and like narcissistic kind of relationships, is when somebody gaslights you, or when somebody kind of like, you bring something to their attention and then flip it on you, because that's like psychological warfare. Let's be honest. That is a really tough space to be in. And like, we've all probably been there at some point, but again, it's just all going to come back to you being able to trust yourself and trust your intentions and trust your experiences as they happen. So it's like, if you're bringing something to somebody's attention of like, hey, this is kind of what you did and this is my reality of how it impacted me, and they're going to try to twist it around. But if you know yourself and you know your intentions, that you're just coming from a space of I'm just communicating this to you and I'm just being honest about how I feel, you're less vulnerable to being gaslit, because again, you're so rooted in yourself, your self-concept, and your your own energy, that it's kind of like, if somebody starts being weird, it's like, all right, bye.
100%. And it's important to have a good community as well. It's like essential.
Yes.
Because what will happen with the narcissists that are gaslighting you is they'll try to strip you away from your community because like they know someone else is going to catch on to their shit. So one of the biggest red flags is if they're like, oh, I don't like when you hang out with so-and-so, or no, I don't get good vibes from this person, because all of a sudden it's like, well, let me dig a little deeper. Why don't you like that person?
Yeah.
Oh, I just got bad vibes. Okay. Well, where was that prompted?
Yeah.
Like, what did they do?
Yeah.
And if they can't give you a clear answer, like, and the gaslighting already starts, now you're catching on to, okay, I'm dealing with somebody that's like not secure and they've got something else going on.
Yeah.
Because if you can't consult with somebody to be like, hey, am I crazy, or is this really what's happening? You're in a position where you start doubting yourself, and then it's way easier to be manipulated or to be gaslit by somebody.
Totally. And I think this is a really great next part of this conversation of like red flags, because again, this is something that is so easy to overlook if you're not super careful. So, okay, that's one, is if somebody says, okay, I don't really like when you hang out with this person, and you probe and you ask them and they can't give you a logical reason as to why.
I mean, if it's like, hey, I don't like, because she's at the club 4 nights a week, she goes out until 2 a.m. every night. And that's just like, what are we talking about? There's nothing good happening over there at 2 o'clock in the morning at 11, right? That's a pretty logical response as to why you might not want your girl hanging out with that person or your guy. Like, I don't like you hanging out with Steve because Steve's at the strip club 4 nights a week. And like, if I'm in a relationship with somebody, my man shouldn't be like bogging down these chicks at the strip club every night. That just doesn't make sense. That all right, now we're talking about something that we can actually have a discussion about, because that's logical. But if it's like, I don't like him because he makes me feel weird, or, you know.
Or it's like coming from that space of like, well, and everyone has a different perspective on this, I guess, but like you can't have any male friends at all. Like the guys that are like super controlling, it's like you also have to be able to evaluate as a woman of like, is this controlling or does this actually make sense?
Yeah.
Like sometimes it's just that this person is not comfortable or they just don't trust you.
Yeah.
You know, and that's another big thing too. Of
well, if they don't trust you, they might not trust themselves.
That's another thing.
That's a red flag.
What is it? The quote, accusations are just a confessions from a narcissist. So, and that's something ever since I read that quote, I was like, yo, like actually I need to stop and like think about this because it's so true. And now I see all my interactions so differently now where it's like, why are you suspecting that I'm being shady when I've never given you any reason to believe that I would be shady? And you're like absolutely certain that something weird is going on here. You know?
This is good for business relationships too.
Okay. How so?
Yeah. I've had people in business relationships call me and they'll be like, hey, are you doing such and such? And I'm like, no, where do you even get that?
Yeah, like where did that even come from?
Yeah, and then it's like, oh, I get it now. Because 6 months later, they're like talking to the attorneys, and it's a whole thing. So I think, spotting those red flags up front before legalities get involved and like you're deep in bed contractually with people is important for marriage and business.
You got to pay such close attention to that. And also like, again, on the topic of red flags, I feel like there's a lot of red flags that may not make sense on a logical level, but like intuitively, it just feels off.
Something's off.
Something's off.
You got to trust your gut.
You have to.
Well, I do want to say you need to trust your gut if you've done the work.
If you've done the work.
Because if you don't, you might just be triggered from some shit that happened to you and you've never addressed it. You're totally unaware of it and you have no idea where it's coming from. And in reality, that's you going back to, 4-year-old, 6-year-old, 12-year-old, whatever that got triggered.
Right.
So like, if you haven't done the work, it's tough to like, how do you trust yourself? I
think it's also just discerning between anxiety versus your intuition, because there's also a difference there, right? Anxiety is based on your fears, your conditioning, the things that you're afraid of, the things that your brain has held on to for all this time that you may not even be consciously aware of yet. But it's like your gut is a different thing. And I get that question a lot of, how do I tell the difference between my anxiety versus when it's like my gut, feeling about something? And I always say your intuition is the first reaction. Your anxiety is usually the secondary one. So it's like, when something happens, for example, you're in a relationship with somebody and something, whether they say something or they do something or you're just getting a weird vibe, it's like, oof. And then like right after that, it's like, oh, but I'm sure they would never do that to me. Right? Like that's, you have to be able to discern between those two things. And it's like every time, and I've asked so many women about this, any woman that ends up in a super toxic relationship, and whether or not they broke up doesn't really matter, but it's like they will always say, I knew it from the beginning. I felt it. I literally sensed it from day one. And it's always the things that you overlooked in the very beginning. That you're like, oh, it's totally fine. It's not that big of a deal. That actually end up being the reason why it ends later on. So can you imagine how powerful you are, right? Like you're starting to like remember,
I'm like, oh, dang.
Yeah, that was actually weird. And I just never clocked it or did anything about it. And that's where it became even more of an issue. So like, imagine how powerful all of us would be if we learned how to listen to that gut instinct. And actually, this is something else that I have recently taken up. And this kind of relates to what we talked about in the last episode too, of like asking God for a sign and kind of like channeling in that way. Like in my last experience with a relationship, whenever I got a weird feeling of like, okay, that's a little sus, but I don't feel ready to act on it or do something about it yet. I'd be like, God, if this is an actual issue, if this is a red flag I need to pay attention to, please make it so obvious that I cannot even ignore it.
Wow.
Please put it so in my face that I literally can't even look away and there's no choice but to do what needs to be done in that situation.
Do you have any examples that you can share?
Let me think. Okay, so there was one point, oh my gosh, actually, yes, I do have one. So there was one point in a previous relationship I've had before where he came over to my house to eat. Like it was a couple days after our first date. So it was like third or fourth interaction. He came to my house and I ordered food for us to eat. And then as he was eating, he's like, oh my God, by the way, thank you so much for ordering this. He's like, I'm going to pay you back. Like, don't worry. And I'm like, okay, like that's fine. And time went on and he never actually paid me back. And it's not about the money. Like I don't like whatever, it's fine. But it's just the principle
of offering
to pay me back and then you not actually doing it. Like now your integrity is in question.
Dang.
And now it's also like financially, are you just frugal? Did you just forget? Like, you know, what's really going on here? And so in that, like, it stuck with me. Like that whole thing was like, everything else was amazing. It was great. But that one experience stuck with me. And I was like, that's just weird. Like I would just keep coming back to it. I'm like, that's just weird. I don't know how to overlook that. And it's also, there's a part of me that says, your husband wouldn't do that to you. You know, there's like a little voice that's like, he just wouldn't, that's not something that he would be doing. So again, kind of like swept it under the rug, but I said, God, if this is something that is going to be an issue, please make it so obvious that I literally can't even overlook it.
And it got worse?
We actually had a conversation not that long after that, because I asked him, it was like randomly, I was like, do you believe that man and a woman, or that a man should be the provider and he should pay, or do you think like, you know, what's your thoughts on that? And he was like, no, I think both should, you know, contribute. I think it's important for both. And I was like, oh, that's where I think maybe we're not very aligned at all, because I'm somebody that comes from the perspective of, in a relationship, a man that's in his masculine energy should want to provide, should want to protect, should want to be responsible for these things. And if he's relying on the woman to also contribute in that way, I think it creates an imbalance. Because if you look at the way masculine and feminine energy works, you know, there's a reason why being a stay-at-home mom is a really good thing for a lot of women, right? And it's because we nurture, we keep the house together, we do all these things. So for me, when I heard him say, oh yeah, I think it should be like an equal thing. Like there's, you know, him, for example, expecting me, if I like just gave birth to our child and then he expects me to go back to work right away instead of having the leeway to spend a couple years at home raising this child of ours, right? Like things like that, where I was like, I actually not sure if I can see myself building with somebody like this, because we're just so mismatched on that level. And the idea of, and like, also he would just let me pay for things like pretty consistently too, where I'm like, I don't mind paying for things here and there, because it is a partnership at the end of the day. Like, okay, sometimes I want to treat you, but like the frequency to which I was paying for things, and he just like, it didn't make him uncomfortable at all. I was like, yeah, this is just not really the vibes.
You know what's interesting about that? I actually used to be very similar to how he thought.
Okay.
Because I saw that growing up. Like my mother and father had a dynamic where like, they were both breadwinners.
Yeah.
You know,
same with him. Yeah.
They both worked and whatever. And like when I was on the 9-to-5 life and I had a little job and I was doing my thing, I kind of thought that way. I'll be honest with you. And it wasn't until I started a business and I have employees, and it's not just me that I have to feed, but it's everybody else.
Yeah.
Where I know, first of all, it's not just that I have to work. I love to work. Like I might be addicted. I might be OCD and have some type of workaholism straight up. That might be my outlet, because I don't drink or smoke or do any drugs.
Yeah.
But I love to work, and I just love the process of building. And here's my thing is like, I think if you're in alignment with your partner and collectively you have a vision of building a family, but I'm also simultaneously building a business, like I'm trying to build an empire, I can't always be home working. I would rather be like, hey, I'll take care of everything and you take care of that part of our vision, because that's the family, that's the home dynamic. I need you taking care of like the flock. So when I come home, I know that everybody is like there. And so I never felt that way until I had a business. Yeah. And now that I have the business, I'm like, man, I just want to work and I want to provide. And I need like as much attention and detail as I'm putting into provision. I need someone to be like the homemaker to take care of everything that I'm not going to have time for.
Exactly. And that's why I'm so glad you brought this up, because this is something else that I really wanted to talk about today, is like healthy masculine energy and what that looks like. Because men and women have such different roles in a relationship. And it's like this whole like feminism stuff, I actually think has taken us back so far, because it's like, oh, a woman, if a woman wants to work, she should be able to. Yeah, of course. But if we're talking about like a healthy dynamic in a household, in a family, which requires both masculine and feminine energy, like a woman needs to be able to attend to things that don't have to do with breadwinning and like providing. Like those roles are just so different.
Can you like think for a second the amount of stress and anxiety a woman's going to go through if they have to take care of the family, cook dinner, you know, wash the clothes, whatever they have going on. Granted, there's maybe some homekeeping and like a maid involved or something to like help out, but think about the amount of stress that she's going to be under doing all that and being like, if I don't work, we're not paying rent.
Like what?
Can you imagine?
Like it's insane. So because it's also a full-time job to take care of a home. Like she's running that ship and you're running the ship of making sure that the home stays there, you know? But it's like, and that's where, again, you really have to be honest with yourself as a man and as a woman as well, of like, you know, what does it look like for me to be operating at my 100% within this partnership? And being with somebody that is going to be able to do, because there are some people that might prefer, okay, the woman is the breadwinner and the man is the one that stays at home. And if that works for you, great. I have my reservations about that, but if it works for you, it works for you.
I think you need to do like almost like a SWAT analysis or something. Like you really need to break down. When I go into business, there's a great book, and it's called Rocket Fuel, and it separates the dynamic between a visionary and the integrator, or also like the CEO and the COO.
Okay.
And so for me, it was like, let me list everything that I'm good at, that I'm just so good at, that when I'm operating in this, I'm flying at 100 miles an hour.
Yes.
Let me also list everything I'm terrible at, right? And so when I made a list of everything I was terrible at, I then put those aside and I said, this is the person that I'm looking for in the dynamic of a COO, because I need to run 100% at this speed and not touch any of this shit.
Yes.
Right? So my COO, he went through the same exercise. He hit 85% of that list. He was good and gifted at 85% of the things that I was not good at.
Okay.
And then we were able to delegate and find employees to handle the other 15%, right? And so I think in the dynamic, what's happened is our business has blossomed in just a very short period of time because of this dynamic switch. And I think if you're in a role at home, you know, I don't want to treat it like a business, but in a way,
it kind of is in a lot of ways.
So if it's like, look, I'm not good at, you know, walking the dog every day and like making time for this and that. And like, I'll do it, but like, it might be 40 minutes after I was supposed to, and the dog's like pissing on the floor. You know, that's because my mind's not there. My mind is doing other things. If you love doing that and you're good at it, like by all means do that. And then there might be 15% of things that we could do together. We could take, you know, different, I don't know, roles doing. Like you take it one day, I'll take it the other day, something like that. Or we put it on the calendar because I'll forget otherwise. And it's like, if you're good at this and that's what you love doing, then you should 100% do that, especially if it's at the home. And I think what I found is there are some guys that just love that. Maybe they were a mama's boy or whatever. I don't know. I'm not that guy. I was a mama's boy, but I still love to like grind. You know? So I'm not saying the two are like intertwined in any way, but there are some guys that just love doing like feminine type shit.
Yeah.
And maybe they need a girl that's just going to be
more her masculine.
Me, like, I don't know. I don't get that dynamic, but I think that there are those types of roles, and if they're happy, like kudos to them.
That's what I'm saying. Like it looks a little different for everyone, but I think that process makes sense for everybody to go through, because something else, if you're listening to this, and this is probably going to be geared more towards women who are listening to this, love is not enough. Love is not enough to make a relationship work. You need to be operating as a team in a way that's efficient, in a way that makes sense, in a way that's healthy, and it benefits both parties and potentially a family if you're going to plan on starting one, right? So I think that's such a good like practice to apply of like, okay, what are the things that I'm really good at, that I'm operating at 100% when this is just my list of responsibilities, versus what are the things that I'm like, I would rather kind of delegate that to somebody else. And if your list matches up with somebody else, then that's amazing. You're golden, right? But it was like in that situation that I was in, like, can I make money? Absolutely. I literally built a 6-figure business, moved myself to Miami. Like that's not something that is impossible for me to do. Do I want to have to do that when I'm married and having kids? No. Why? Like, you know, because I want to be able to focus on other things like raising my children, whatever, like keeping my house together, doing all these things. So it's like, if you're like me in that way, where, you know, you would rather be in your feminine energy, not have to worry as much about the money because you want to do more of the homemaking stuff or whatever, you can't be with a guy that says, well, you know, I don't really like making money that much either. I would rather focus on spending time with my kids or whatever. And it's like, I don't think that's going to work though.
No, but that's why you have to ask the questions up front.
You do. You need to be so clear about that. And again, just being like knowing within yourself, whether you're a man or a woman, like what would freedom look like to you, if you really being in this space where I feel really good, I'm doing the things I want to do every day, I'm able to sustain this relationship in a healthy dynamic. And like ask yourself, what would that require from my partner, like the ideal partner of like, I want a man that has maybe the provider mentality, or comes from the mindset of like, oh, my wife does not have to work, she can if she wants to, but like that base is covered. Like you have to really get to know yourself to know what that list looks like.
You also have to be okay with what comes with that.
What do you mean?
So like, here's the thing is, you could say like, I want a guy that's going to hustle and pay and grind and all this stuff, but I also want him to be home every day at 5 p.m. so that we could hang out and have dinner and walk the dog and shit. Like you got to have some give and take here, because the guys that are grinding and hustling and they want to build. Like they don't want to be cut off at 5 because I have to go home because my wife's going to freak out if I'm like, if I have to stay late until midnight because we have a huge event coming up or we have something happening, like there is some give and take there. Maybe I'm going to not sacrifice, but maybe that might be a bad word for it, but maybe I'll compromise and say, hey, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday this week, I'm home early. We're doing our thing. We'll spend some quality time together, especially if you know that person's love language is quality time. But then Thursday, Friday, Saturday, like I'm after it. You will not see me because I'm leaving before the sun comes up and I'm coming home after the sun is down. And so there's got to be some compromise there. So it takes people willing to be able to make that. But at the same time, it's like, you can't have both sometimes. It's like, it just is reality.
And that's, you do have to be so realistic about that, because I do also know of a lot of women that say I want a big baller. I want a guy that's
but then he's never home.
But then he's never home. And then all you do is complain about it. It's like, no, that can't be the case. Like, you also have to come from a space where you understand what his vision is and you're able to have a supporting role in that. But again, it's also about compromise too. Like, it's not black or white. Like, there's ways to work through it. But generally speaking, you have to kind of be aware of what sacrifices that will entail. And just, again, also looking at it from the perspective of, could I be with a guy that really doesn't really care about building as much? But then what am I sacrificing? Yeah, we could spend all day long together. Yeah. But then, like, what are your values? What's important to you? If financial security is important to you, then, you're going to have to make that sacrifice. Yeah. So that's a really big one too.
Yeah, it's huge. So I mean, there has to be a give and take.
Totally.
It's important. And so, on that same line, I think if you're expecting to have 4 or 5 hours every night with somebody, like, they might not be, maybe they are, maybe they have a great job and they're like, on a, I don't know, as an example, a nurse's schedule or an RN, and they're making 150 grand a year, or I don't know how much they make, but maybe they're doing well for themselves and they have the balance. That's great. Now you have the best of both worlds. Yeah. But if they want something more, it's going to require more. And so that's why I think it is very, very important, if you're a woman who's expecting to be with a man that has a big vision, an entrepreneur, a hustler, somebody that's like grinding, then either one, you have to be okay with that person being a little bit older, because they've already been through that journey that it takes in their 20s and 30s in order to make it, right? Because it's a grind until you really like get some traction and you're able to delegate properly. Or you're going to have your own vision. And I think that's a big problem, is a lot of women, well, it's a big problem for men mainly, because let's be honest, the masculine dynamic, like a strong masculine, I don't even want to use the word alpha because it's so red pilled out, but if you're a strong man in his masculine, you have a compelling vision, because a woman wants to be a part of something. Yeah. Employees want to be a part of something. People that are working towards something, if they don't have a vision of their own, need a vision to follow. So a leader has to come into play there. But I think it is very important for a woman to have a vision as well, whether it's to build the family, build the home, have a coaching program, be a realtor. I don't care what it is, as long as you have something that you can also work towards when I'm not home, right?
Both people need something to be actively contributing to. And that just goes back to, like, a healthy partnership requires 2 healthy people.
Exactly.
2 people that aren't just, relying on a relationship to make them happy, or just like putting the relationship on a pedestal. It's like, you also have to have your own life and your own things and your own vision, so that when you come together, you're building something awesome. And I think this also ties into a really interesting topic of, there's a lot of people who say, especially women in particular, who say there's just no more good men out there. Like, when you're thinking about, like, for example, if you just went through a breakup or you're in a really toxic relationship and this person is just showing up in a very unpleasant way, and it's like, okay, why don't you just, break up with them and find somebody else? It's like, oh, well, slim pickings out here. Like, the guys that are out there are just not really like that. I can't emphasize enough how important it is to let go of that mentality and really just be able to trust that whoever is right for you, like the ideal person, does exist because you exist. If you are your ideal person, if you have all these qualities that you're wanting in somebody else has them simply because you have them. It's going to be a reflection of your own consciousness. So it's like, you have to be able to make a list, like we're talking about, of all these things of like, okay, where am I at 100%, and what kind of man do I want or woman do I want to kind of complement that? You have to believe that that's out there. And if somebody is showing up in a way where it's not lining up with that vision, you got to be willing to walk away. 100%. And that's that, because you got to create space for the new one.
I get this all. So I mentioned briefly on the last episode that I lead a men's group here, and I have 207 guys in my group now. On average, like 50 to 60 show up in person once a month. These guys, over and over again, incessantly, constantly, I can't find any girls.
Really?
There's no good girls in Miami.
Interesting.
And I'm just like, guys, what is wrong with you? There are so many women in the city. And then they're like, yeah, but we're choosing from like 1% of the girls that are not like out like bottle servicing and like doing all this stuff and on OnlyFans. And I'm like, there's so many women in the city. There's women online. There's women all over the place. And you guys are not actively on the hunt to pursue this woman, right? Like, if you're a hunter and you're a dog and you're out here like doing your thing, first of all, you need to become the man that you want to be, or the man that your woman deserves. And then you need to go find this girl and pursue her. Because you guys are just waiting for these chicks to come to you, and like, how feminine is that?
That's so feminine.
So
that is so feminine.
It's like, guys, get out there and, go to the areas where you think that they're going to be. Don't just go to the bar looking for some chick at the bar. Like, if you're into your faith, go to church, go to the mosque, hit temple, see what's up with the girls there first, especially if you're going to be like equally yoked in that manner. And then if you're like into sports, why don't you hit the beach workouts and go to like coffee and chill or whatever these things are. Look into the places where you have similar interests, because you're going to find somebody instead of like just waiting for some chick to come find you. It's crazy.
So important. I think it's also just so funny that both sides are saying that of like, oh, there's just nobody out there. But it's like, are you really aligning yourself with that person, or like putting yourself in a position to be seen or to pursue that person? So that's a big deal too. And it's just so funny where they're like, oh, all these girls that hang out at the bar. It's like, if you're not looking for the kind of girl that does that, don't go to the bar. Don't go looking for your wife at a bar if that's not the kind of girl you're trying to vibe with. So yeah, that's also a really big one. There was something else I was going to ask as well. Do you find that, obviously a lot of men and you work with a lot of men very closely. Do you find that there is a lot of men that are in toxic masculinity, or just like haven't really done the healing or haven't really done the work? Like in your perspective, like what are those numbers looking like?
Well, first of all, toxic masculinity is feminine.
Okay.
Because you are so insecure with yourself that you have to project this version of yourself that's like, rah, I'm an alpha male. I can do and say whatever I want. And I can like lash out in anger or just whatever. It's like the only reason you're doing that is because you are so far in your feminine that you have to like make it look to everybody else on the outside that you're not. So number one, like all this red pill movement is garbage. So in reality, a person who's actually masculine is in tune with their emotions, and they know how to regulate them and use them at particular times. Like there is healthy anger. There is healthy, ways to cope with when you're sad. Like it's okay for you to cry. It's like things happen. And when you bottle them in and then you explode and release, that's not masculine. That is a very emotional, reactive, feminine behavior.
Yes.
Right? So you need to be able to tame those things. There's something about being stoic there's so much like masculine beauty in that. And I say masculine and beauty because like it just is what it is. And what I found right now is that there's so many men that don't know who they are, and they don't know where they want to be, and they don't have a compelling vision for their lives, that they're wish-washy all over the place. And I would say it's probably like 90% of men, because they have no idea what they want in life. And the very first thing that you need to do if you're a man is to find that vision. And if you don't know what it is, you have to get with yourself long enough to figure it out.
Totally.
Like you have to be okay and comfortable being in isolation to ask God what it is, wait for a response, and when you get it, write it down and then go after it.
Yeah.
Because like I tell my guys this all the time. You guys are trying to follow this like red pill movement and these like dating coaches and all these things telling like wait 2 hours to text her back. Bro, what are we talking about? If I'm busy and I got shit going on, I'm not texting back because I'm fucking busy.
Yeah.
I'm not going to wait 2 hours. Like you're going to get it. If it's the next day, I'm sorry, I was busy. I had a lot of shit going on.
Yep.
It's not because I'm intentionally like, I got a clock. Okay, I can text her back now.
Yeah.
Like that, what is that?
The intention behind that is just so lame. It is feminine. You're like, oh, playing cat and mouse.
Yeah. So the game that's being played is really just a game. And if you're actually a man who's on his purpose and you're busy doing things that are getting you there, you're going to attract people that are going to be like, I love where this person is headed. I understand that they're busy. Yeah. Therefore, I value their time so much more because I get a little bit of it, because they're investing it in me.
This is so funny because everything you just described in terms of like a man that is not in, or he's in his toxic masculinity, which really is just in his feminine. This is what so many women deal with when they're with somebody that is just not aligned. It's usually because it's a guy that has not yet stepped up to the plate of being a real man, developing that vision, having something that he's working towards and building. And that's where the issues kind of start, like that wishy-washy energy that you're talking about. Like, for example, the women that are probably listening to this have had an experience or are actively going through an experience with a man where he's not really committing to you, or he's just being kind of like super flaky or whatever. And it's like, that's a telltale sign that this man is not operating out of his healthy masculine because he's not there yet. Like as a woman, you have to also be able to identify that and filter it out, because again, love is not enough, you guys. Just because you love him, you adore him, that doesn't mean that it's going to work. He has to have a certain amount of development and like work that he's done on himself in order to sustain a healthy relationship. And if you start noticing that he's playing games, or again, he's wishy-washy. If you ask him where he sees himself in 5 years and he's like, I don't know, just like floating around, like fucking, like, okay, that's your telltale sign that he's not in his healthy masculine. You are a woman who needs a man with a vision. And if it's not there, you have to be willing to be like, deuces, you're just not my guy, at least not right now. And that's okay.
Well, it's important because if a man has a vision and it's not including you, then that's a big problem, right?
That's huge.
So if I have a vision and my vision is, hey, I'm going to build this into a media empire and we're going to buy an $11 million building or build it, which is what I have plans for, then like, where do you fit into that? Okay, well, if I also don't have singularly just that vision, but I also have a vision of, hey, I also want to have a family and I want to have 2 or 3 kids and I want to have a home and like, I want his and hers car and I want to like, I got this whole plan and you're not fitting into that, or you're not the type of person that fits into that. Me as a man, I'm like, hey, look, we're just not in alignment. This isn't going to work, right?
Yeah.
You're like trying to tell me that I can't work until 11 p.m. when I'm trying to get here.
Yeah.
And like, you could be helping me build this over here.
Yes.
Or do we have this? This might not be your vision, this business. I get that. But are we aligned over here?
Yeah.
Do you want this? Do you want the house and the car and the kids and all this stuff? Because if that's the case, then now we're talking about something. But if you don't fit into that vision, what are we talking about? I don't even want to date you. You know?
And I think it's so interesting because there's so many men that feel that way, but then just won't be honest about it. Like I've heard a lot of stories from my friends in particular, just like women and my clients, people around me, of like men that know that she doesn't fit into his bigger picture, whether he has a bigger picture or not. He just doesn't really see her in it. And then rather than communicate that and kind of put an end to it, it's kind of like they just become either, whether it's ghosting or whether they just kind of withdraw or they just kind of push her into a place where then she's ending it. Like that's a big thing too. Like you as a woman have to be able to evaluate whether he's telling you or not. Like, do you fit into his plans? Does he see you as part of his future? Wow. Because if he does, he's going to move mountains to make sure that you're on his team and that you're with him. You know, like men are literally biologically engineered to move mountains when there's something that they want, when they have a certain goal. If he's not moving mountains to be with you, he does not want you and he doesn't see you in his future. And like bitter pill to swallow, but you know, it's what's the phrase? Staying on the wrong train gets more expensive the longer you stay on it. Like you just need to get off. That's the thing. Like I feel like women should look at that. Look at relationships as like, okay, if I step on a train, the second I realize I'm on the wrong train, am I willing to step off, or am I just going to sit there and hope that the train changes directions one day? No, babe, it's not. Like spoiler alert. Like you really have to be able to have the willpower to be like, I respect myself too much to be with a man that doesn't even see me as part of his vision.
Wow.
Point blank. So that's a big one. Last thing I am also curious about that I just want to ask you. There's a lot of talk on social media and just like dating coaches and all this of like, you know, how long should a man wait before proposing to you? Or like, should there be a timeline on that? Or like, how does that kind of work? From a man's perspective, is there a real timeline, or is that just something people talk about just to put a rule on there?
I mean, I think when it comes to the timeline thing, it's different for everybody because there are people that you'll meet and you'll be like, I just know. Yeah. Like my dad met my mom, and within like the first date, he knew. Oh. He was like, that's the one. Yeah. I'm marrying her. He asked her to marry him like 6 times and she said no. Oh my. Yeah. Wow. And he just kept pursuing her. And then he was like, I pulled out every trick I could find. And he was like, finally, I got to the point where I was like, I got to play dirty. So I went and I got in good with her father. Oh, wow. And then her father was like, talked to her and was like, yeah, like this is for sure the guy that, you know. Interesting. So she's playing checkers, he's playing chess the whole time. It wasn't even checkers. She just wasn't ready. Oh, because she had been in a previous relationship that she was like engaged to be married, and she called it off because it didn't feel right. So she was like, I don't want to get in another one. I'm just like waiting. Yeah. And so he like pulled out all the tricks to try to make it happen. And eventually he did. And they got married within a year. Wow. And then they had me a year later. Okay. So it was like for him. So me in my mind, I was like, man, I've got to do that. Yeah. Because that's how my dad did it. And so what happened was when I got into college, I found somebody, and it was like the first, I was like, that's the one, I'm gonna marry her. Right. Oh, okay. Interesting. And so I couldn't have been more wrong. Like this was a nightmare. Okay. This was like the first super toxic situation I had ever been in, where I was just like, yeah, that wasn't the play. And thank God I didn't, go forward with that, because all the red signs happened and like it just blew apart in a very negative way. But it's like now I play it more safe, where I'm like, hey, if I don't know for certain that I see this person in my life long term, like I have to tread carefully, because I got to protect my heart. Because your heart, like you have to protect it above all costs. And so if I see a future with somebody, I'm making preparations and plans in order to make it a reality. Because what I don't want to do as a man is like, I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna marry her. And then I don't have a plan. How the hell am I going to pay for this wedding?
Yeah.
How am I going to buy a ring? Like, I'm just going to put shit on credit cards and like pay it off later when we're in a relationship. Come on. That's not going to happen. So it's like, do I have an account set aside? That's my ring account. Yeah. Like I got money in the ring account.
Yeah.
You know, this is our wedding account. So it's like, I'm making mental preparation to get there. And maybe she doesn't even know that that's happening. But in my mind, I'm making plans now because I am moving mountains in order to do that. But I don't want to be half-assed about that decision. Like we're talking about the rest of our lives. This is not like something to be taken lightly.
Yeah.
And if you know, and like it's instant and immediate, like congratulations, that's amazing. But I think there's a lot of people that are like, hey, this is a big commitment and I want to be careful about the commitment that I make because I take it so strongly. Like that's my vow. That's my word. I don't want to be 2 years in and break it. So if I'm going to make a decision that's going to last the rest of my life, like I really want to be smart about it.
And I think like a woman will get that energy from a man as well. Like, on the get-go of like how he talks about it. So that's something to pay attention to if you're a woman and you're listening to this, is like watch how he moves in life in general. If he's the type that's making plans and like taking steps and like doing the things, then you're with somebody that like is in his healthy masculine and is planning for that end goal of like being with you. So
I think most women just want to have security.
Yeah.
Like where they know like, okay, that is the direction we're going in. Because again, like you have to have that vision. And if the guy doesn't have the vision, then the girl's gonna be like, what the fuck is going on here?
Like,
right?
There's no security, there's no safety in this, there's no
like,
anchor.
That open communication is strong too, where it's like, hey, you know, I didn't want to show you that I have this account but between you and I, this is where my mind's at. And I want to make sure that I'm making a good decision and I have like solid foundation. So this is the trajectory that I'm headed. And this is the goal that I need to hit or the objective. And once I hit that, like, you know, we're doing this thing, but I want you to know where my mind is.
Yes.
And now all of a sudden she's like, oh, okay, we're going in the same direction.
Yeah.
It's not like this shit could end any day. I have no idea what's going on.
And I feel like you'll know because there's that energy. And then there's the energy of like, when you bring up maybe the future or whatever, and he's like, I don't know right now. Like, this is just too early and it's just too soon. That's a very different energy. And again, as a woman, you have to be able to gauge when he's just kind of like putting things off or just I
did that too.
A lot of guys do. I feel like that's just part of the evolutionary process of becoming a man.
But it's like, I wouldn't know what I know now about having that vision and the trajectory and doing that had I not done that and then had healthy communication with my significant other where she told me, hey, I'm feeling insecure right now.
Yeah.
Like this is not giving me good vibes. Do I have to end this and figure something else out or what's going on? And like, if you can have that communication with somebody, it's so healthy and it's so good because now I can say, man, yeah, I am kind of fucking up. I probably should like get my shit together 100%.
Yeah.
And so I wouldn't know that had we not had the conversation. So there, again, I mean, all of this stuff goes back to healthy communication.
Yep.
All of it. And setting healthy boundaries. And then again, like the man has to have a vision. If there is no vision, the people perish, the relationship perishes, everything falls apart.
Yeah. Wow. This was such an incredible episode. I want to thank you so much for coming on here and sharing all your wisdom.
I feel like we didn't talk too much about the breakups.
I mean, I feel like we covered a lot of really good stuff about how to heal through realizing maybe that you're with the wrong person, whether you're at the point of a breakup or not. Like, I think we covered a lot of really good spaces. And before we actually hop off, every episode at the end, I like to do a Limitless Challenge of the Week to help listeners integrate what they've learned from this episode. Okay. I have an idea, but I'm going to ask you, do you have anything that you would want them to do for this week?
Oh, if you are someone who's going through a breakup, there is a really good book that helped me, and it is called the Grief Recovery Handbook.
Grief Recovery Handbook. We'll put that in the show notes for you guys so you can take a look.
I'm not an affiliate. I get nothing from this, but it really did help me. It has like practical steps, and then you can write the person a letter afterwards. And it's like kind of like just detox, let it go. Closure. Yeah. Okay, I love that. So that will be one Limitless Challenge of the Week. If you are going through a breakup and you're really wanting help with navigating that on a granular level, that sounds like an incredible book. The second thing I would say is whether you're in a relationship or a breakup or not, I think it would be really good to do what you mentioned of writing out that list. Yes. So can you explain that one more time? Yeah, for sure. So just make a list of everything that you know that you are strong suited in. I want you to like imagine that this was a business arrangement, you know, give and take, you know, your thoughts on that. But let's just imagine this was a business relationship and you want to write down everything that you're strong suited at and what you're good at and what you know fills you and gives you life. Right. And then write everything that you know you're just not good at. Like, I don't wash the dishes for shit. There's always stuff left behind on the dishes. I'm not good at it. I don't like folding clothes. I don't like doing this. I don't know, like whatever those things are, you know yourself, and you're going to write all those things down. And then also, more importantly, write your non-negotiables. So what are the things that I have a non-negotiable? Like, is this person a Christian? Are they religious? Are they this? Are they that? Like, write your non-negotiables out. And when you go meeting people for the first time, if they don't hit that non-negotiable list, then like just cut it right then and there, and start asking open-ended questions. Like, don't ask someone, hey, do you believe in this? And they say yes. It's like, hey, what do you believe in and why?
Let them expand on it. Let them show you where they're at with
How
it.
was your family dynamic growing up? What's your relationship with your folks? Are you cool with your dad? What's up with your mom? Yeah. Like, you could really start narrowing down those red flags early and save yourself a lot of heartache.
Okay, I love that. That's so, so good. I'm going to also add a little modification to what you mentioned about the lists, because a lot of listeners of this podcast are going to be women. I would challenge you to take it a step further. And when you're writing out the list of what you're operating 100% on, I want you to think of it in terms of what makes me feel like I'm 100% in my feminine energy, right? What makes you feel like secure and taken care of? And in what ways do you want to be able to embody your feminine energy? And then what is required from the man to be able to, you know, on the opposite end of that, what's going to be required from him to be able to put you in that position? Because at the end of the day, this is about manifesting the right relationship with the right person, becoming the woman that is able to sustain it, and attracting him through that. So it's really good to get clear on all of that. And
you have to. You have not because you ask not.
Ooh.
So if you write it down and you ask for it, like, think if someone came up to you and they were like, hey, what are you looking for in a man? And you're like, oh, I don't know. Maybe he's 6 foot and has brown hair. Like, come on, you know, but it's like, look, I got a whole list. Let me pull this thing out for you. You know anybody like this?
Literally.
And then it's like, oh yeah, no, not, I was going to introduce you to John, but John's an asshole. He's not going to fit that list. You know, it's like,
there has to be a list though.
If you have that, then you know what you're looking for, and other people know what to look for you.
Yes. And that's the difference between being in survival mode versus being a conscious creator and calling in intentionally what you know you want to experience. So Drew, thank you so much for being here. This was such a cool episode. Thank you so much. We'll put all of your information down in the show notes so that everybody can give you a follow and check you out.
Let's do it.
Yes, and if you're watching this on YouTube, don't forget to subscribe. We're going to post our new episodes coming out every week. Follow on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, the whole 9. Thank you guys so much for listening, and we will see you next week.